In this video, we're going to be replacing the front hydraulic motor mount on this 2008 Acura MDX. We're going to take our wheel off and use a 22mm socket. All right, so when you're working with transmission mounts or motor mounts, you do have to have your motor supported. You can either support it from up top with an engine bar, or you can support it from underneath with either a jack stand with a piece of wood on it between the jack stand and your engine case, or a pole stand, again with a piece of wood between the pole stand and your engine case. In our case, we opted to use our engine bar across the top for support. Now that we're underneath, our aim is to lower this cradle so we can get to our engine mount. To do that, we have to remove this bolt from our transmission mount. That will allow us to bring this down and get access over here. All right, so with a 14mm socket, we're going to remove the transmission mount to the bracket itself. Just going to break that free and then back it out. To lower our cradle, we're going to need to remove this bolt here and slightly back this one out, not remove it. We'll start here. It's going to be a 17mm. We have 3 bolts up here. They're all going to be 17mm. They're going to be the same on both sides, same location, same setup. So we'll take these front 2 out. All right, now we're going to back this one out. We're not going to take this one all the way out. Just going to back it down about halfway. We'll start there, and we'll move across to the other side, and then we'll go to the back. Same thing on the driver's side, same setup. Again, 17mm. And we'll again back this one out about halfway. We'll start there, and we'll move again to the back. Same thing as the other side. A 17mm bolt here, another one here. We'll remove this first. All right, now we can start backing down these bolts here. These are going to be our main cradle bolts. We're not going to take these out. We're just going to pull them down about halfway. All right, we'll start there. We'll move up to the other side, do the same thing. Same thing here. One more 17mm bolt. Back it out about halfway. Now, if you see what you're doing, you're lowering your whole suspension. Everything forward, that cradle all the way around is coming down. We're just looking for enough room to pull our engine mount up front. All right, so now on the front 2 subframe bolts, we can back those totally out now. All right, so now we have an idea of how long these bolts are. We don't need to take them all the way out. You definitely do not want to take them all the way out, but we can back them out a good portion of the way. So we'll go ahead and do that now. What we're looking for is enough drop in the front, just enough drop in the front to take our motor mount out. So while you're doing this, keep an eye on how much you've taken out and keep an eye on the front. You don't need to go more than you need to. That looks like a good amount. Do the other side, same thing here. Should be pretty good. All right, so now we have our line going into our engine mount. Just going to pull it out of the clip. And this blue line here, that's where our connection is made. We're just going to use a panel pliers, panel clip tool, and pull this apart. Okay, so from the top of the motor down, we have two 17mm bolts we need to remove. We have a deep socket, a swivel, and a long extension. Okay, there's one. All right, so here's the cover. It goes over top of your engine mount. From the top down, you have four 14mm bolts. You have a deep socket, a swivel, and a long extension. I'm just going to back those all the way out. All right, if we can't reach them from the top to pull the bolts out, what we can do is when we get under the vehicle, we can take them out then. As long as they're backed out and free, that's the main point of this. All right, to access the back bolts on your motor mount, we have found this angle here, a deep socket, a swivel, a long extension, and go in through your hood latch. Should give you just the right angle to get on that back bolt. We're just going to back that out. And one more around the back. So up on the top of our mount, we have one more screw facing rearwards. It's going to be a 14mm. I'm going to get in here. And break that free. Right, so now we're going to take our 4 bolts out from the bottom here because it's a little bit easier to reach. All right, so now with a pry bar or your hand, you can slide your engine mount forward like that. It should be totally free. Now we can go to our corners and pry down our cradle to see if we can work out our engine mount. All right, so now we're going to take these pieces out here, held in by two 12mm bolts. We're removing this to hopefully give a little bit more access to take our motor mount out through this area here. We're working from the bottom, so we're going to use a little bit of an extension to get around our hoses. There it is. All right, so now with our rubber block here removed, we can try and pry down our cradle and remove our mount from this side. You will have to watch out for your rubber hoses and lines. Hopefully they will bend up and out of the way. Just be careful with your hard line portions. Let's try that now. All right, just going to put our new part in. Now that we have our mount situated in place, we're just going to put our 4 bolts back in place. This is just to hold the mount while we work around putting everything back together. All right, now that your motor mount can't go running away on you, we can move on to this piece back in place and reinstall our bolts. For this bolt right here, if you can get it from the top down, go for it. If not, what we can do is take these bolts out of our motor mount and just slide our motor mount over. Now with a 1/4 inch drive, we can get in there. All right, and again, that's partially why we left our motor mount loose and not tightened down. Now we can put our motor mount back in place and tighten down the other side. All right, so again, we'll just put our bolts back in place. Before we put our subframe bolts back in, we've noticed that we've moved our subframe a little bit and our engine transmission mount is out of line. So what we'll do now is just pry that forward and put it back into place before we reinstall our bolt. Now we can start reinstalling our subframe bolts and bracket. So our bracket's going to go up first, and then our bolt. We'll just start that bolt by hand. Make sure we're not cross-thread. And we're just going to snug up to the subframe, and then we'll do the other side. On this side, same thing. I'm going to put our bracket up first. And thread in our bolts to start. And snug them up. All right. Now what we can do is keep an eye on these brackets, make sure they're in place, not way out of way. And we'll evenly bring up left and right. In the rear, the same thing, bring it up evenly left and right. All right, so now we can bring up our back bolts. So we're not going to take it all the way up. We'll move over to the other side and bring them up even. Also keep your bracket mostly aligned. So now we can bring this bolt up, keep our bracket in somewhat of a alignment here. As this gets tight, this bracket will be hard to move. Watch your fingers. All right, so we've bottomed that one out. We'll move across back to the other side, bottom that one out. All right, so now we can bring this one all the way up. And just take a small hammer and just tap our bracket into place. And bottom this out. So while we're here, you're going to put these bracket bolts in. Start them by hand. And bottom it up. All right, so up front, what we're going to do, see if we can get our two front bolts in here just started by hand. Just a couple of threads. That'll help keep this bracket in line when we torque this all the way up. Tighten this up a little more. You don't want to go all the way, but about halfway. It's pretty good. We can move over to the other side and do the same. All right, so now we're going to do the same thing. We're going to put our 2 front bolts in here, just a couple of threads. And we can move back to our back bolt. And we're going to send this about halfway up. I'm going to go back to the other side, finish that side, come back here, finish this side. So we're going to start back here and bottom this one out. And we're going to take these 2 and bottom them out. All right, so we'll start back here. We'll bottom this one out. I'll move to the 2 fronts. All right, so now for our 4 main subframe bolts, they're going to be torqued down to 76 foot-pounds. Now these outside bolts on the brackets are going to be 86 in the rear, 86 foot-pounds. And our front subframe bracket bolts are 54 foot-pounds. All right, so now we can put our bolt through our transmission mount. If the transmission mount is still not lined up, you can use a little flathead or a Phillips screwdriver to just put a little leverage back and forth to line that up. Ours looks pretty lined up. Put a couple of threads to see if it catches the captured nut back here. Pull backwards, looks like we're lined up all the way. So now again with the 14 millimeter, tighten that down. Bottomed out, and our long bolt through the actual transmission mount is going to be 40 foot-pounds. Now we can install our top bolt. All right, so we used a 14 millimeter deep socket. We realized it was just a little too long, so we switched over to a 14 millimeter shallow socket. All right, now that we have this snugged up, I'll come back and torque it. And we'll come back and torque that to 40 foot-pounds. So now, for our hydraulic motor mount, we have our hydraulic line. We're going to have to remove this from our old mount, put it on our new one. This one's been on here a while. You can try just pulling it straight back. Doesn't seem like it wants to move at all, so what we're going to do is try and help the spin with a small pair of bent needle nose pliers. We're just trying to spin the hose. Okay. At this point, just want to check, make sure that hose isn't broken or cracked. Looks like we're in good shape. Put it on the new one. All right, so now we're going to put our hydraulic hose onto our motor mount. Just going to use a pair of needle nose pliers if we need to. Just kind of push up into place. All right, now from here what we can do is connect the other end of our hydraulic line. It's just a push connect. Make sure you push it together. This little sleeve here can move out of the way. You can move it to cover. We're going to move out of the way. Spin this little clip up top and then seat our line in place there. All right, so if you follow your hydraulic line that we connected in the previous step, if you follow that straight up, that bracket that's connected to the hydraulic line that connects it to the motor mount needs to be put back in place. So at this point, all you're going to do is just set it on top of the stud on the motor mount. Now we can put the top bracket on. All right, we're going to thread on the two nuts. Now that we've started them by hand, we can switch over to a ratchet, 17 millimeter. We have a long extension and a swivel. I'll get that one snugged up. We'll come back and torque them down. All right, we're going to torque these down to 48 foot-pounds. So now we're going to tighten down the 4 bolts holding our engine mount down. It'll be 14 millimeters. All right, so I'm going to torque these down to 48 foot-pounds. All right, so at this point now your engine mount is back in place, fully torqued up. If you use an engine support bar, now's the time to go ahead and remove it. If you use the jack underneath your vehicle, now's the time to remove it. Go ahead and release our support bar. Loosen these up. With a 22 millimeter socket, we're just going to snug these up. Now with the vehicle on the ground, we can go ahead and torque down our lug nuts. We're going to do it in a crisscross pattern. I'm going to torque them to 90 foot-pounds. Because we lowered the cradle and we moved basically our entire front suspension when doing that, once this is back together, I'm going to take it to an alignment shop, make sure everything is back in place where it needs to be.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.